when you look up your home's value on the internet, how accurate are those numbers? Let's dive in and talk about it. Hey, what's up? It's me, Haley Jones, your local Knoxville and East Tennessee real estate agent. I help clients buy and sell homes and property in the Knoxville and East Tennessee area. So here's the thing. The internet, AI, have you heard of it? Tells us a ton of information, which can be hugely helpful. However, sometimes that information is not correct. And in the case of home values that you see on the internet, these really are essentially to be thought of as a guidepost. We're going to talk about, I'm going to show you home valuations for 8 different properties that I sold last year, just as a sample. So you can see what were the automated value models saying, the AVMs, automated valuation models. So that would be things like a Zestimate. When you go to homes.com and you go to Realtor.com, they all have some kind of value for your property, okay? How accurate are those? And how much consideration should we take into those things? So first, I would just want to talk about these AVM models. Essentially, the more accurate they are has to do with how cookie cutter is your property. So for example, if you own a 2-story traditional home in a neighborhood with a bunch of 2-story traditional houses with the same size yard, they were built around the same time, they're cookie cutter, and 50 of them sold last year, or in the past 30 days, the past 90 days, whatever. Those valuation models are going to be very accurate because they have a ton of data about what's sold that's just like your house. However, the more unique or historic or luxury or rural your home is, the less accurate those AVMs or those automated values that you see online are. Now, if you go to ChatGPT or you ask Google and you say, hey, Google, hey, ChatGPT, hey, Gemini, hey, Claude, whatever you use, how accurate are these? This is what they'll say. The typical error range is 5 to 10% in many suburban markets, but this can be off by 15 to 20% in rural areas, luxury homes, unique properties, historic properties. AVMs are more accurate for tracking trends than setting an exact price, AKA. They are kind of like, hey, here's a likely range. Probably don't want to price your house just based off this value. If it's 10% too high, if it's 20% too high, that's not good. If it's 20% too low, theoretically, some people would tell you can't price a house too low. I go back and forth on that. That's a whole other video. Okay, that being said, you're leaving money on the table. 20% below what it could get, not great. Again, more accurate also cookie cutter places and where markets are stable. Now, if we think about like the Knoxville and East Tennessee market, for example, because that's where I am, okay? This idea of a stable market I think is interesting because Knoxville from 2019 to 2025, go watch these videos. I did one on Knox County and also the surrounding counties of Knox, so kind of East Tennessee. Pricing almost doubled from 2019 to 2025. And in some home segments, it did double. So 2-story plus a basement, prices doubled. Townhouses, etc. So that being said, would you characterize that as a stable market? Now, has appreciation slowed now as we go into 2026? Yes, we're not seeing that crazy price increase like what we saw before. However, it's not like we've seen consistency in pricing or even consistency across types of housing. So that's something to keep in mind. And also keep in mind that we have multiple markets here. So you've got your residential Knoxville market, you've got your investor market when it comes to Sevier County, Great Smoky Mountains, and all your short-term rentals, your vacation homes and all that. You've got your lake markets, which can be a combination of residential and investment. So there are lots of threads going on when it comes to valuations. Now, that being said, when you see that AVM, that value model for your home, you're not thinking like, oh my God, it's wrong, but it's probably giving you a decent idea. Now, what I found is, when you're gonna see this when I show you the data from the houses that I pulled, some of the houses I sold last year, what you're going to see is that essentially the ranges are all correct. Everybody's range was right, but the actual price, not correct. Like the price they said it was going to sell for, not correct. And even if we looked at comps, those were varying, because every house is like a person. Unless it's in a cookie cutter neighborhood, then this doesn't count. It's a lot of our houses here are not clones, and so you've got to be looking specifically at what does the house, how is it different from this house to that house, this street to that street, the one next door, the one across the street. Is it what's happened here? Okay, so you want to get very, very, very specific. Also, custom homes. If you have a custom home and it's very custom, that's fine, but be careful, because some people don't like the custom that you made custom. You know what I'm saying? You get it, right? If you don't get it, call me and we'll talk about it. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to say about this idea. 5 to 10% in suburban markets where there is plenty of data. That's a pretty big swing, right? So 15 to 20% in areas that are more rural, historic, luxury, etc. Okay, we're gonna jump into my computer and I'm going to show you the data from the homes, from some sample homes from last year that I sold. Let's do it. All right, so we are now in my computer. So what I did, what I'm gonna show you is when I pull something I started doing last year, I guess, maybe the year before, was looking at what does the internet say? Like when someone asks me for a market valuation, I start with what does the internet say, for a couple reasons. One, because I'm curious what the internet says. For two, I know that this person, this client, whoever, has likely seen what the internet says. At the very least, they've seen Zillow, they've seen the Zestimate. Okay, so what I do is put together a packet of sorts of like, this is what the internet says, this is what the comps say. So for example, if we look at this property, 548 Knowlton, this is one I sold. Actually, all these are ones that I sold. That's how I know well, I guess I could, whatever, you know what I'm saying. I could pull a whole bunch, but I had the data before we listed all the way through to close, right? So I'm only looking at some of the properties I sold last year, okay? So that being said, this property, just for context, you don't know anything about it, don't go look it up. I'm gonna explain it in a second. We're gonna get into the details of this property, but we can see that these automated value numbers are all over the place, all over the place. 714 on the low to $1 million on the high. Okay, so it's hard to miss when I say the range. So that's like when I was saying earlier, the ranges are always correct. Well, because the ranges are huge. Okay, and then we look at the comps for the property. What's happening in the specific neighborhood, and this varies by the house. It varies like where the house is, if the neighborhood is big enough, if it's in a community versus a neighborhood, if it's in a community and then a neighborhood and then, you know, whatever. So in this case, this house was in Sequoia Hills. And so we look at Sequoia Hills as a whole, and we look at detached properties, because Sequoia Hills does have some townhouses, some condos. So we took those out, and that's this number. This is giving me the overall what's happening in Sequoia Hills picture. And then if I look at what's happening with past 90 days of sales, plus or minus 20% of the square footage of the home, this subject property, we saw this was a higher price than what was happening in the neighborhood. And we also saw that these homes, that the square footage, were selling more quickly than what's happening in Sequoia Hills as a whole at the time of these numbers being pulled. And then in this case, I pulled the actives because we saw this kind of weird market situation towards the end of 2025, and this was summer of 2025. So I just wanted to see where we're active sitting and how long had they been there, what was our immediate competition if we listed right now today. So we don't usually do a valuation based on the active simply because those are not proven sold prices. But in this case, you see this here because I wanted to know. So all the houses I'm going to talk about, each of them, that's where these numbers are coming from. Okay. So let's get to my data sheet. You know, I love a data sheet. If you haven't guessed, this is a data deep dive. If you've seen them before, then you're here. Okay. So hopefully you can see this. I'm having a hard time knowing what exactly you can see. But a couple things I just want to know. Over here, as I mentioned earlier in this video, look at this. None of these are really traditional. These two, most similar. One is in a West Knox neighborhood. One is in a Maryville neighborhood with the most kind of similar turnover in the sense of like we had some pretty good comps to look at. So just kind of keep this in mind. If you see this kind of reddish color, that means the AVM, the automated value, was over what it sold for. So in this turquoise color, this is actually what they sold for. The greens to me are within range. So the takeaway here, if I zoom out, look at this. Very few greens, right? And none of these AVM models consistently show green. Like Zillow, one time. RPR, so that's Realtor's Property Resource. So that's connected to, that's just a resource I have as an agent. I had thought like, oh, this would be the most accurate. And it's actually, some of these were higher. The MLS tax suite. So that's looking at, it's pulling comps from the tax record based on how the tax suite is comping the home. Batch leads. This is like a site that a lot of people, like investors, use to find houses. You can look up how much people's mortgages are owed, and you can find comps that way. So sometimes I'll use that just for another idea of like, what is this saying? Who are they identifying as competition? Realtor.com, of course, I'm sure you've heard of it. Homes.com, similar. Homes.com, this one had nothing for a range. That's weird, but that's a whole other story. That was Cedar Lane. So that was a historic house. And that one, oh, I didn't pull Homes.com, I guess, on that one. That's why there was nothing. Chase, you can get home values on Chase. Trulia, again, I didn't pull Trulia. Trulia tends to match what's happening with Zillow. Trulia and Zillow are not the same, but are owned by the same company. And then Redfin, again, so the whole point, I'm highlighting all of these because nobody is consistently showing like green. Interestingly enough, this one that's rural has 4 that were in range, which I think is interesting. Too high and too low. So anyways, okay, so the takeaway here is that Zillow is a mix of very close, too high, and too low. Like this is a huge difference, right? Now this one's interesting because this house had just sold in May. My sellers bought it in May. They were trying to sell it in August. They had done $70,000 of work to it. It was a big ask for them not to lose a ton of money. And you're like, why would they do that? Well, she found out that she was having a baby and they were like, we need to move. We got to be closer to family. We have no one here in Knoxville. So anyways, that's an interesting one because this one sold way higher than anticipated. And these numbers were based on the sell price that happened in May, right? So I think this is an interesting one to give you hope that like anything is possible, okay? And then if we look at these historic and luxury, do we see any trends? We see higher than, or well, we see very close to, a little more than, lower, lower, lower. The ranges are always seeming to be correct. So there is no valuation model. The whole point of me showing you this is that like none of these are actually the right price. Okay, so then if you're like, well, how the hell do we price our home, Haley? Great question. So these are the AVMs. Again, you can see like none of these really are overly accurate. This one I think is the most interesting because it's more rural. It's in a place called Bean Station. Beautiful home. But no really exact comps for what it was, because it had an additional, like it had a big lot. It was interesting, an interesting property, but it also sold very quickly. And then if we look at these historic, like we've got these two here, historic, and we've got Glenfield, also historic home. We see that everybody almost had way higher. And you'll see when I show you the more specific comps that we started closer to this price because the comps called for it. But people did not like some of the renovations, and that my seller wanted to move it quickly. So I'll talk about that in a second. So anyways, you can see the whole point of this is just to show you like these valuation models, they are a guiding starting point. They're not necessarily where you would price your home. None of them show consistency. Like when I say consistency, the reason why I color coded these is because I was thinking there's going to be a clear standout in terms of who is giving the most accurate, and none of them do that. None of them really, like if we look across Zillow, the pattern we see is some are too low, some are too high, one is spot on. Same thing with RPR. MLS tax suite, right on or below. Batch leads, right on or mostly below. Realtor.com, kind of some high, some low, one right on. Homes.com, they give you that range, honey. They ain't wrong, but this doesn't help. 718 to 850. Come on. Sorry, I didn't mean to yell. Chase, same thing. Trulia. Again, the whole point is like, hey, none of these is completely accurate. Okay, so then let's look at what they actually sold for. Okay, so same property in the same order. We see original list price. We see actual sold price here. Now, just zoom this in for a second. Comped values. So this one, I don't know where I put my data for this one. So these are why these two are blacked out, because I pulled the data, but I don't know where I put it. I printed it off. I put it in my little booklets. Everybody gets one of these little booklets like this, and I bring it to your house and we talk about it. So both of these got a booklet with that information. Where it is in my computer, I have no idea. So anyways, that being said, if we look at the ones that had comps, so let's just take a look. This is even after we pulled 90 days of sales, plus or minus 20% square footage, the most similar to these properties. We saw that in some cases, list prices right on, directly on. In some cases, we see that these comped values were too high. These red, if we looked at the comp for what it was too high based on what sold. Now, why would that happen? Let's talk about 548 Knowlton. I also have a YouTube story for all these except for Newman Hollow. It sold so quickly, and I was in Ireland and part of that process, negotiating over the phone. So I don't have a lot of my stuff for that one. But anyway, so that one I didn't do a video on because when you're in Ireland, it's like, what are we doing? Anyways, that being said, okay, so 548 Knowlton, this one, cute, super cute house. Oh my God, so cute. In Sequoia Hills, literally so cute. However, it had one full bathroom and 2 half baths. It's 3 stories. And the full bath is upstairs. Come on. So this basically made it so that the buyer needed to be someone that didn't care about steps, because the laundry was in the basement. All the bedrooms and the full bath were on the 3rd floor. So 2nd level, but 3rd floor. So 3 flights of stairs. You could potentially add a shower in one of the other half baths, most easily in the basement because there was space for that. but that's a renovation, right? We had so many showings on this house. We had great feedback. The single bathroom really killed it. So even though price per square foot was still under at list, the comp value said a $958 would be appropriate. We priced it lower than that because of the bathroom situation. We got a couple offers, some of them contingent on a home sale for a house that wasn't even sold yet, just some difficult stuff, and ended up settling at $800. And so this was, big difference. But again, that bathroom really hurt that sale. Now, if we look at this one, Woodhill, beautiful home. Comped value based on square footage would have said 1.4 million. It did sell faster than what the comped values were saying. This one got a little bit of pushback because the primary bedroom was the entire top floor and it had no door, which sounds horrible, but I'm telling you, the house is beautiful. You can go watch the video of it. It's beautiful. 3836 Woodhill. And it's got the top floor is, like I said, the primary bedroom. And so that deterred two types of buyers. Can you guess? That deterred people that have small kiddos and then people that just wanted a door. Now, the whole floor was the primary suite. So it wasn't like it was open access necessarily. You could add a door at the top or at the bottom, but that was a turnoff. But more so it was a turnoff with people that had small kiddos because they wanted to be on the same level with those children. And the buyer ended up buying it. They had some older children. So I believe is my understanding. So anyways, that being said, the comp value was even too high. But again, this is another one. We had a ton of showings. People didn't like the bedroom situation. Christchurch and Edenbridge. Now these two are the most traditional and their comps proved to be the most accurate when it came to comp value. So comp value was a little bit low. But I mean, these are also pretty solid range. Now let's talk about this one. 1117 Edenbridge. This one, two-story traditional in a neighborhood. It's giving that same kind of idea when it said like the AVMs are the most accurate with a traditional suburban neighborhood. Now here's the comp value, 457. Why did we not price it there? Well, because the most similar within 90 days sold homes to this house, one had a basement and one had a 4th bedroom. So this was a 3-bed, 2.5 bath. The other comps that were most similar based on square footage, one had a basement and one had that 4th bedroom. So we knew that this was probably a bit high. There was also, at the time, one active on the market that had been on the market for a while at this 450 price range. And it was completely updated. This one had an updated master, updated like flooring, updated bathrooms. However, the kitchen not updated at all. It had a beautiful back deck, but the kitchen was a glaring, this is not updated. The other one for sale is. So we knew that we needed to be at a price point that was going to justify, hey, we know that other one down the street, that kitchen is updated. This kitchen here is not updated. We get it. And this one sold quickly. This one actually had a backup offer as well. Like this one was very quick. It's in a West Knox location. It has a lot going for it as well when it comes to the Knoxville market, but here we see even that comp value was too high. Another historic home, comp value a little bit low. This one had a pool, huge. When I say pool, the backyard was like an oasis. Okay, beautiful home, tons of updates, lots of storage. However, the seller had completely redone the home. And when she redid the home, she put luxury vinyl flooring down rather than hardwoods. There were hardwoods in certain places that were beautiful, like in the entry, in the living room, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful hardwoods. However, she had pretty much not redone she had redone the footprint of the kitchen, which meant that the original hardwoods, like, yes, they were there, but it was patchworky. And then there was a back room where there had been a flood at one point, And so that original hardwood wasn't even there to use. And so had she tried to piece together all this hardwood, it would have looked like 10 different floors. And so she just went with a LVP, whole bottom level, whole main floor. And 19 of our showings, every single person was mad about that. They did not like that. I think it was 19 or 15. It was a lot. A lot of people were like, what's wrong? Why did you put LVP down? This is historic brick. Beautiful. I mean, so nice. Beautiful home. Beautiful home. But they were bad about the floors. She also wanted to sell it quickly. She did not want it to be shown without the furniture. You can go watch the story of this house. I'm kind of telling you probably more than I should because the story's there, but just for the context of the pricing, we got the price because we knew it had a pool. There was nothing else really like it. There was one down the street priced higher than it with less appeal, not as great of a lot. And so that's where that price came from. And you can see like it's that comp value is still too low. We knew that because there was not a ton of stuff like this lot. So anyways, but all that being said, she thought like, let's start here at 175. Let's see what happens. Tons of showings, which implies same as this one. When you have tons of showings like that, it's like, well, the price isn't a huge deterrent because we're having tons of people come opening weekend, tons of people showing up. So we know we're not incredibly far off on price, but then we get the feedback and it's like, oh, this floor sucks. So anyways, she wanted to quickly reduce the price because she was moving all the furniture out to put it into another house that she was purchasing. And she did not want the house to be shown without furniture, which is smart. So she dropped it. And one of the very first people that came in, I think it was the one or it was the first weekend of people, but I think it was one of the very first showings. Those people, they came back and immediately put an offer on it. And we had a little negotiation, but anyway, so that's kind of the story of this house. But this is another one where it's like historic luxury. If we looked at what the AVMs said on this one, 3800 Glenfield, we see that a number of them were high, some of them were low. What we actually sold for, this 1.5. So even that comp value was low, but we knew like this house, it had a lot going for it. The pool, I'm telling you, amazing, so good. Newman Hollow, this was that rural one in Bean Station. Pretty straightforward on this one. This one actually we had the offer I think was at 500 and they negotiated down a little bit for some repairs, if I'm remembering that correctly. And then this one, Brooks, this is again, tells you like this was a very different one because comp values were super low. However, this was an income producing property. So we had to take that in consideration. They were selling this as a furnished short-term rental with a proven short-term rental history with shown income, right? So that being said, the pricing of this was interesting because there was nothing like it when it came to comps. If we looked at what do the comps say based on price per square foot and a 1 mile radius and all of those things, 90 days of sales, this price would have been way too low, right? So anyways, this was a kind of an interesting one to comp. This number, this 290 came from the rental history, and the rental history justified essentially this price, and we ended up at 245. So anyways, that is probably more information than you wanted to know. Takeaways here are that AVMs, these automated value models, are a good starting place. They are not the end all be all. They can give you some direction, but then you want to look specifically at the comps. And then you also want to be careful about what are the pros and cons of your house and how does it compare to what's sold recently, as well as what's active. I think you probably noticed that I was mentioning that quite a bit is when we're pricing, we look at what is our direct competition. And if we price ourselves like the one that has the kitchen not redone, if we price ourselves at the same price point as a house with a kitchen that is redone, which is more perceived value? The one that's got the kitchen that is redone, right? And people are automatically going to say, well, this is priced too high because the one down the street, that kitchen is redone. So we don't want to compete with things we don't need to compete with. We want to be realistic when we're pricing. And then also take into account that what's happening in the market, how are buyers behaving right now. All of these were towards the end of 2025. So, people were very sensitive about mortgage rates or rates coming down. So we saw some lag on some in terms of buyer action, unless it was just something that was so specific or unique. Even though, like, for example, the one I just talked about with the pool, very specific, very unique luxury home. The floors really just were like a huge deal. So anyways, that being said, I hope this has been informative for you when you're thinking about, like, how much do I get from a home? Or if I look online, is it accurate? Now, obviously, if you want me to do a valuation with comps, if you want me to pull all the AVMs and do an actual valuation with comps that are most similar to your home, then let me know. I would love to do it. We can take a look at it, check it out. That being said, I'm Haley Jones. As always, I hope this has been helpful. Take a look at the other videos if you have interest, or click subscribe. Love to have you subscribing so I can share more information with you. I'm Haley Jones, and if you need to buy, sell land, homes in the Knoxville and East Tennessee area, please call me. That is 100% why I make these videos. That being said, I'll see you next time.